A day that's full of grace will let us put a smile on our face and be amazed to a new learning and full of fun and physical education. So I am Miss Ina, your instructor. So let's go and get ready to be fit and learn. So for our course outcome number 2, we have here definition of human anatomy, the other position of our body, plane axis, terms of movements of our body, and the skeletal system and muscular system. So first, let's discuss about human anatomy and human movement. So what is human anatomy and human movement? So when we say anatomy, this one is the study of structure and relationship among structure. So when we say physiology, this one is the study of how our body structure function. So in human anatomy, we have called anatomical position. This one is the body is erect with the feet parallel and the arms hanging at the side with the palms facing forward. So this is the other position of our body. So we have anterior and posterior position. So when we say anterior, this one is to be suited near towards the front of our body. When we say posterior, this is to be suited towards the back of our body. Second, we have here superior and inferior. So when we say superior, this means to be suited towards the upper parts or head of our body, which is positioned above another organ or structure. When we say inferior, this is towards the lower part of our body or position below another organ or structure. So we have cranial and cradle. So when we say cranial, this one is refers to the head end of our body. So when we say cradle, this is refers to the tail end of our body. The third position of our human movement, we have medial and lateral. So when we say medial, medial is to be closer to the midline of our body or to our structure. So being internal as opposed to external. Next, we have lateral. So when we say lateral, to be a farther away. So this one is the direction either the side of our body, from the midline of our body or our structure. Next, we have proximal or distal. When we say proximal, proximal is towards or the nearest trunk or the point of origin of our body or our body parts. When we say distal, distal is away from our farthest from the trunk or the point of origin of our body. 5, we have unilateral and bilateral. So when we say unilateral, this one is one side of our body. When we say unilateral. When we say bilateral, this is the both side of our body. Next, we have here superficial, intermediate, and deep. So when we say superficial, this one is near to our outer surface of our body. For example, the skin is the superficial to the muscle layer of our body. Next, we have intermediate. So when we say intermediate, this one is between two other structures of our body. Example, the navel is intermediate to the our trunk. So next, we have deep. When we say deep, this is farther away from the surface of our body. For example, our muscular layer is deep to the skin, both superficial to the intestine. So after we discuss about the movement, we have here the terms of movement of our body. Number one, we have flexion and extension. So when we say flexion, this one is described as a bending movement. And when we say extension, this is the opposite of flexion, which means describing a strengthening movement that increases the angle between our body parts. For example, this one is flexion and this one is extension. Flexion and extension. Next, we have abduction and adduction. So when we say abduction, this is the movement of our body parts away from the midline. For example, this one is our midline. So abduction is the part away from the midline. For example, our shoulder or our elbow is abduction because this one is the part of our body away from the midline. So when we say adduction is the movement of our body parts towards the midline. For example, our chest is our midline. For example, our navel is our midline. So that is adduction. Next, we have supination and pronation. So when we say supination, this is rotating our hand or our forearm laterally. For example, you are holding the soup. So this one is supination. For example, the supination. This one, as you can see, is supination. And pronation is rotating our hand, forearm, or medially. For example, pouring the soup. This is pronation. Next, we have plantar flexion and dorsiflexion. This is the movement of our ankle. So when we say plantar flexion, this is the point our toes or foot downward. For example, you are stand on the tiptoe. That is plantar flexion. When we say dorsiflexion is point toes foot upward. For example, foot of the gas pedal is dorsiflexion. Next, we have here inversion and eversion. When we say inversion is the movement of our sole of foot inward. So, inversion meaning inward movement of our foot or sole. For example, the eversion. Eversion is the movement of our sole of foot outward. Next, we have here medial and lateral. So when we say medial rotation is the anterior surface movements toward the midline. Lateral rotation is the external. Anterior surface movements away from the midline. This is lateral rotation. Next, we have circumduction. So when we say circumduction is the Latin word meaning around. So this one is the combination of flexion, extension, adduction, and abduction. After the terms and movements of our body parts, we have here now the planes and axes. So what is plane and axis? So when we say plane, this is the surface on which the movement occurs or takes place. So when we say axis, axis is the line around which movement takes places. So axis is a singular and axi are the plural noun. So any movement occurs in the planes around the axis is the same plane makes the angle perpendicular to that plane. In planes, we have three. So the first one, we have sagittal plane. So when we say sagittal plane, this is a vertical plane of our body which passes from the front to the rear, dividing the body in two symmetrical halves. So, for example, in sagittal plane, this one is you cut your body into two. So when you cut here, so it's meaning this one is a sagittal plane. So we have left and right for the vertical plane. Next plane, we have here horizontal plane. So when we say horizontal plane, this is the body which is parallel to the diaphragm is called transverse plane or horizontal plane. So you cut your body into horizontal. So it's called horizontal plane or transverse plane. It is the same, horizontal plane or transverse plane. So this is the imaginary plane that divides the body into superior and inferior parts of our body. It is perpendicular to the coronal and sagittal plane. The last plane, we have frontal plane. So when we say frontal plane, this is the plane of our body which passes from the side to side at the right angle to the sagittal plane is called frontal plane or coronal plane. So when we say coronal plane, it is also known as frontal plane is any vertical plane that divides the body into ventral and dorsal, meaning the belly and the back section of our body. After we discuss about the three plane, we have here Cartesian coordinate system. So what is Cartesian coordinate system? So when we say Cartesian coordinate system, this one is the coordinate system that specifies each point uniquely in the plane. For example, the x-axis, y-axis, and z-axis. Sagittal axis. So when we say sagittal axis, this one is called as anterior and posterior axis. So this is the bisect of our body laterally from the side to side or dividing it into the front and back halves. So the plane regarding the sagittal axis is coronal, frontal, or lateral. The frontal plane divides the body into front and back. Next, we have here vertical axis. When I say vertical axis, this one is divide the body horizontally into superior and inferior halves. Regarding the plane of horizontal or transverse plane, this plane is divide the body into the top and bottom of our body parts. Next, we have here coronal axis. This one is called as a frontal or lateral axis. When you bisect your body from the front to back, this one is dividing it into the left and right halves. So sagittal plane passes through the body from the back and front, so dividing it into the left and right of our body. So after we discuss about human anatomy movement, let's move on for the skeletal system. So what is a skeletal system? This one is our cardiovascular system. It composes our 206 bones that along with cartilage, tendon, leg ligaments make up a framework or the skeletal of our body. We have axial skeleton. The skeleton can be divided in two main parts. The axial skeleton consists of 80 bones. The primary bones of axial skeleton are the skull, spine, ribs, and sternum. Anterior means front and the posterior means back. This is the anterior view of our skeletal system. We have here appendicular skeleton. Appendicular skeleton is consist of 126 bone. The primary bones of the skeleton are the shoulder or pectoral girdle, arms, hands, pelvic girdle, legs, and feet. The function of our bone. So when we say bones are composed about 50% of water and 50% of a solid classified rigid substance known as osseous or sinews of tissues. For bones, this one is provided by the shape, support, and the framework of our body. Bones also is the protect of our internal organs. And bones serve as the storage place for minerals such as salt, calcium, and phosphorus. So the function of our bones. Bones plays an important role of our internal organs. This is the formation of our blood cells that takes place in our bone marrow, blood cells that keeps place of our marrow. So the bones provide also a place to attach our muscle. Bones makes movements possible through articulation. This is the matter in which our parts came together at the joint. Classification of the bones by shape. So bones can classify by shape. Four of those classifications are long bones, include the femur or our thigh, tibia, our larger shin, fibula, the smaller shin, humerus is the upper arm, radius the larger forearm, and ulna is the smaller forearm. Classification of bones by shape. Bones classified by shape. Four of those classifications are hand bone, which is phalanges, metacarpals, carpals, ulna, and radius. This is the short bones include the carpals of the wrist and tarsal of the ankle. We have here flat bones. It includes our skull, sternum or our breastbone, and scapula, which is our shoulder bone. We have irregular bones, which includes the vertebrae, which is our spine and our pelvic. We have here the bone structure featured in this long bone illustrate those found in all bones. So after that, we have here our joint. Our joint is a place where two or more bones connect. The manner of which connect determines the type of movements allowed at the joint. So joint is allow free movement in variety of directions, such as knee, hip, elbow, wrist, and foot. The types of body movements of our joint, we have adduction, flexion, and extension. The types of body movement of our joint, we have supine, prone, and circumduction. And we have here dorsiflexion, protraction, and retraction. We have also eversion and inversion and rotation of our body. We have right lateral and left lateral and Fowler's. So we have vertebral column in our skeletal system, which is composes the separate of our bones called vertebrae. This one is connected to the four spinal curve. A curve has more strength than a straight line. So can support the weight of the body and provide the balance needed to walk. A cervical curve contains the first 7 vertebrae. This is thoracic curve contains next to 12. The lumbar curve contains 5. The sacral curve does not contain the vertebrae. It contains also the sacrum and coccyx, or our tailbone. The male and female pelvic. So the pelvic is the lower portion of our trunk of our body. This is the hip bone, sacrum, coccyx for the pelvic base. This is the hip bones, includes the ilium and ischium. Bone growth and resorption. This is the bone is continued by broken down by osteoporosis process called resorption. So what are the muscles? So muscles are elastic and allow the wide range of motion. The elasticity allow our muscle to move our bones and our organs that they are attached. Some muscles also is your body are always at work. So muscles are used to breathe, to make your heart beat, and move food through your digestive system. So this one is the muscular system of our body.